Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to really get into the weeds on topics shaping our world.
Exactly.
And today we're looking at something pretty much everyone does. Blaming other people. Specifically, how some groups just seem to become these really convenient targets for blame, almost everywhere.
It's a fascinating human thing, isn't it? A way we kind of deflect, maybe, our own responsibility.
Yeah. So our mission in this deep dive, using the source material you've brought, is to try and unpack the reasons why the white man and the Jew have become, the source calls them the two biggest scapegoats.
Right. It's provocative phrasing, but that's the core of the material we're examining. We want to look at the stories, the narratives that keep these ideas going and what might be them.
And just to frame this up front, the sources definitely acknowledge that, look, external stuff is real, trauma is real, systemic problems exist, no doubt. But for this discussion, based on our sources, we're focusing on how that personal responsibility piece sometimes gets lost when the blame shifts outwards onto these groups.
And one really striking idea from the source is why these two groups, it says it's because blaming them often feels justified, not just to the person doing it, but maybe even in society more widely.
Like a get-out-of-jail-free card, the source says, for when things aren't going right in your life.
Exactly. Your job, your relationships, money, health, it becomes an easy out, I suppose.
Okay, let's dig in. The source actually starts with a personal admission, right? Saying they've done this themselves.
Yeah.
And it broadens out. I mean, think about it. We blame parents, exes, the boss. The government is a huge one. It's a common pattern.
It really is. And look, people are born into tough spots sometimes, things they didn't choose, trauma, experiences that shape how you see everything. That's real.
Totally.
But the source really hammers this point. You still have to do the individual work to move past that stuff.
Which leads to this idea about why the white man and the Jew are maybe different kinds of scapegoat. The source says it's because people feel they can get away with it more.
Yeah, that's a key phrase from the material, that in many circles you can link almost any personal problem back to one of these two groups. And, it doesn't get questioned as much.
You could just sort of park the blame there.
Right. It makes them uniquely powerful targets, according to this analysis.
Okay, so let's unpack the white man first. The deep dive suggests this is especially common on the political left, among people identifying as liberal or progressive.
Yes, that's what the source highlights. And it's not just about blaming an individual white guy. It quickly becomes about whiteness.
Whiteness is a concept.
Yeah, like a grander idea or this system of white supremacy that's seen as actively holding people back, especially people of color.
And the source talks about coded language, too, like systems of inequity.
Right, saying that often, even if those phrases are used, the implication traces back to whiteness being the root problem.
So how does the source connect that systemic view with, personal feeling?
Well, it suggests that when Black and brown people, as the source puts it, see whiteness associated with success, it leads to questions like, why them and not me? Why did they get those experiences?
Okay.
And the argument presented is that this can feed into a culture of personal victimhood, particularly mentioned within the Black community.
But framed as legitimate concerns, right? Like pointing to stats where a group is lowest on every ranking, money, education, etc.
Exactly. And from there, the source says, it can feel like there must be some greater conspiracy.
Interesting. What about the role of white liberal in this, according to the source?
The material explores that too. It's just motivations like white guilt or maybe seeking a sense of purpose by attached cause.
Okay.
But the potential downside highlighted is that this involvement might maybe inadvertently end up perpetuating the victimhood instead of, say, focusing on tools or information for individual uplift.
That's a tricky line. But it brings up a core challenge from the source.
Yeah.
How can some external man really be controlling your personal day-to-day choices?
Right. The source really pushes back on that. It says, look, there are people constantly pushing these narratives, these ideas.
Sure.
But ultimately, you're an autonomous human being, a free-willed entity. You choose whether to buy into those things. It's like picking a radio station, the source says, or deciding what you eat. The choice is yours.
Even with something like money troubles, the source connects that more to internal stuff.
Yeah, things like self-worth, self-esteem. It gives examples like lottery winners or athletes who end up broke again. The suggestion is maybe it's easier to blame an outside force than to look at those internal patterns that self-sabotage.
Easier to blame the system than the self.
That seems to be the argument presented. It draws that line.
Okay, let's pivot to the other main scapegoat mentioned, the Jew. Now, the source says that on the left, sometimes the Jew is just seen as part of whiteness.
Yes, that's a key point the source makes. And because of that perception, it argues, it becomes easier to label them colonized.
Even considering the geography, like Israel's size compared to surrounding nations.
Right. The source emphasizes that disparity, 50-plus Muslim nations, billions of people versus one small Jewish state, maybe 7 to 9 million people. It presents the colonizer label in that context as an example of how rational argument can get sidelined once a scapegoat narrative takes hold.
It's framed as the ultimate way to avoid personal accountability. And then there's the money stereotype. They're the bankers. They control the systems, so they control my finances.
And the source counters that directly with that personal story we mentioned.
Yeah, the speaker being broke.
Right. Saying, essentially, when I was broke, no Jew took money from my account. No white man did. I spent it with my debit card. It's a very direct challenge to that specific blame game.
So where do these powerful narratives even come from? How do they stick? The source talks about needing a compelling narrative.
Yeah, something that feeds confirmation bias, where you look for things that prove what you already believe.
And these aren't new ideas, right? The source points way back.
Exactly. It brings up historical figures like Karl Marx and quotes the source as saying he basically laid out a plan. Take away the Jews' Judaism, then eradicate him. Strong words, but that's the historical link the source makes.
Wow. And that connects to modern language, coded language.
Yes. The source argues that words like capitalist, which it claims Marx used as a stand-in for Jew, or today, words like Zionist or Israeli, can function as these kinds of boogeymen.
Meaning, they're used to mean the Jew without saying it.
That's the assertion, and the source clarifies the basic definition. A Zionist simply believes Jewish people deserve a homeland, and Israeli is a citizen of Israel. But these terms get loaded, used as proxies.
Shows how language shapes this stuff. What about the psychology? Why do we need an enemy?
The source suggests our brains like simplicity. We want a clear bad guy, so we create these quantified enemies.
The evil Jew, the white man in a suit in an ivory tower. It makes complex problems seem simple.
Exactly. It satisfies that need for a clear adversary.
And underneath all of this scapegoating, the source lands on one core idea.
Envy?
Envy, plain and simple. I want what you have, or even, I wish you didn't have what you have.
That's the central theory proposed, that all this blame, all these narratives, they're really just expressions of envy at their root. It kind of reframes the whole thing.
Okay, so if envy is the root, how does the source challenge these narratives? It brings in culture, diligence.
Right. It shifts to looking at why certain groups might have achieved success, offering a counter-narrative to the conspiracy or oppression angle. It uses the example of Jewish immigrants, say, in New York.
Starting with nothing, basically.
Yeah, the oddball jobs, living super frugally, saving every penny, slowly building things up, flipping clothes, buying small stores, creating this culture of entrepreneurship, productivity.
And then passing it on, educating kids, keeping wealth in the community.
Exactly. Over generations that build. And eventually, the source argues that success gets perceived by others as them being in control.
And it's not just one group. The source gives other examples.
It mentions the Igbo in Nigeria, Armenians in Lebanon, Chinese communities in Southeast Asia, groups that faced hardship, but, as the source describes it, kind of retreated into themselves, focused internally, and found ways to thrive.
And we see that today too, right? Immigrants starting with very little.
Yes. Driving Ubers, cleaning floors, whatever it takes. And then, building up, owning chains of gas stations, convenience stores. Their kids become doctors, lawyers. It's presented as this pattern driven by cultural values and sheer hard work.
So how does that apply back to the white man's scapegoat? If we see more white men in finance, say.
The source poses the question, could it be because they were culturally pushed? Raised to, instead of being fixated on entertainment, be fixated on finance, law, medicine, engineering. It's just a cultural emphasis.
Okay, but that leads to this fairness issue the source mentions.
Right, the fairness trap. When a group shows disproportionate success, the source uses Asian Americans in universities as an example. The argument from some, often identified as white liberals in the source, becomes, that's not fair.
And that leads to trying to level the playing field in ways that might hinder excellence.
That's the concern raised. Attempts to take opportunities away, or even declarations like, math is racist, or the SAT is racist.
But the source draws this really interesting contrast with the Jim Crow era.
Yeah, saying that back then, Black people had to work twice as hard, and because of that, they often became twice as good. The adversity itself became a catalyst.
The struggle could actually create a culture of excellence. Let's move to the next level.
That's the implication, that overcoming obstacles built strength and drive.
Which leads to this irony the source points out. Even if you create a system with a leg up for certain groups,
you still get failure and average because, the source argues, it disincentivizes that deep internal drive for excellence that comes from striving.
It really makes you question how we define fairness and success. The source throws out stats too, like the Nobel Prizes.
That 20-some-odd% have gone to Jewish people, a tiny fraction of the world population.
And then it flips it, asking you, the listener, to think about sport. The number of black men in the NBA, the NFL.
Is that a conspiracy? A black cabal?
It uses that comparison to highlight the double standard, right?
Exactly. To say, maybe it's easier to yell conspiracy about one group's success than to ask, wait, maybe there's something these people are doing differently, culturally, focus-wise.
So wrapping this all up, it seems the main message is, question things, yes, but be careful about creating these huge, sweeping conspiracy theories about entire groups.
Yeah, it's healthy to question, but don't paint with such a broad brush, because the reality is always more complex, isn't it?
There are poor Jewish people, rich ones, successful white people, struggling ones, just like any group.
Absolutely, in every single ethnicity group. Maybe cultural factors lead to higher numbers in some fields, but that's different from a secret plot controlling everything.
Which brings us back again to envy, that core idea.
The source even references Dr. Thomas Sowell saying, effectively, if you want people to stop hating you, just fail.
Wow, that hits home, doesn't it? Even on a personal level, success can breed envy from people you wouldn't expect.
It's a very human thing. So the source rejects these simple cabal theories. Yes, there are bad people in all groups, good people in all groups.
They just might look different, right? Crime in one area versus white-collar crime somewhere else.
Potentially, yeah. Different manifestations.
And then the source leaves us with this really direct challenge. It asks you, the listener,
which specific white man? The guy in the trailer park? The homeless vet? The one drowning in student debt? Is he controlling your life?
Or which Jewish man? The one struggling to pay rent, working behind the counter? Is he the puppet master?
The source basically says, no, these are just valid excuses to continue to be a victim.
It also distinguishes between criticizing a government, like the U.S. government,
which doesn't mean you want the country destroyed,
versus criticism of Jewish people or Israel, which the source argues is often rooted back in that envy. Manifesting is this belief in a grand conspiracy controlling your life and maybe implying they don't deserve a home.
It's a subtle but important distinction the source makes.
So the final takeaway from this deep dive, the absolute bottom line, according to the source, is if you stay fixated on blaming the white man, the Jew, whoever,
you're just going to stay stuck. It's always, the source claims, been about envy.
Wow. Okay. So we've covered a lot. The universal tendency to scapegoat, why these two groups are highlighted in the source, the role of envy, culture, personal responsibility.
All drawn directly from the material provided for this deep dive.
And it really puts the power back in your hands, doesn't it? The ability to move beyond blame. Because if real success, like the source suggests, comes from a different mindset, productivity, diligence, looking inward.
Then the question for you to maybe, what's your own beggar's mentality or blaming mentality might act back for that